So welcome, sisters, to our Monday Vision Circle from the Sacred Ground Collective community. It's always so good to be in circle with you. And as I was mentioning before the recording, there are several who said, boy, I can't be there. Please record it. And so we're holding space for those who are here and those who are vicariously here and those who will be listening by way of recording. But I'm really excited for what we have to share with you today. The first thing, let's set our circle and intention. So just quietly let your breath move your attention and your focus back to this present moment in time. That you're here, you're in this physical bodysuit that moves you around, and just send blessings and gratitude to that great intelligent field that is your physical body. There's so much we can do and so much impact we can have because we are in a body and because we are in a female body. And in this present moment, breathe and let that move your energy down the midline of your body, right out your feet, anchoring it in Gaia, Mother Earth. Expressing our gratitude for her allowing us to be on her surface, deepening our commitment to restoring her grandeur as we restore our own. Grateful for all that her elements, her life forms, her beings bring to us in circle each time we meet. And we are here in the sacred ground of sovereignty, knowing we are beings from the stars, that we have direct connection, secured connection to our homes there, to our families there, to the guides and teachers from beyond Earth. That we so appreciate in this time. And we're also grateful for the time that we live in, that having restored that voice of Sophia, the authority to say to agendas of domination, no, you are to be made extinct. You are not allowed in our world. We know that that authority makes it safe for us in female bodies to begin sharing with each other our gifts, our wisdom, restoring the whole as it was in the beginning, coming back together to learn and teach and restore the unity that we were and are. So we are grateful for that. So we are gathered here, knowing we were held by life in all of its magnificence. And that we are here to help each other be calling, doing the work, creating the beauty that we are currently called to do. And with that, our circle is called and set, and we are ready to work together. And so it is. So let's each place ourselves in the circle. What we usually do is put your name, where you are on the planet, and if there is individuals, either by name or number, you want to put in that field of divine good for healing and restoration and blessing, you can do that by number. Any situations on the planet, you can do that also, placing that in the field of divine good. And what is a quality or a value that you would like amplified within our circle and therefore out in the world? So name, where you are on the planet, any that you want to put in that circle of divine good for healing and restoration of good, and then quality. So I will begin and then we'll tag as we go around. So Sharon Raji Maynard here in Whidbey Island, state of Washington. Drizzly day, typical. I want to place 36 people into that divine good. All agendas of domination to be made extinct. And the quality I'm going to add is gratitude. And I'll pass to you, Deborah Levine.
Okay. I'm
Yep.
Deborah Levine. I'm here in Chattanooga, Tennessee, where it is unusually warm. It will be 80 degrees tomorrow and the next day. Crazy, but beautiful in its way. I would like to add to the circle 7 individuals who are currently living in Israel and hope for their safety and healing from trauma. I would also like to express gratitude to all my colleagues who are currently assisting entrepreneurs in becoming successful with their creative, innovative ideas. I just met with them this afternoon. And my characteristic trait that I'm thinking of is related to them, and that is being innovative. So I will now pass over to Arlie.
Hi, I'm Arlie. I'm in Eastbourne, New Zealand, just across the harbor from Wellington. It is cold outside. It's supposed to be springtime here. We have a southerly and it's drizzly and gray. I would like to bring in 24 people. And the situation of the domination over animals that occurs when they accept onto themselves our emotional upheavals. I believe that we now have the capacity, the information to handle these things ourselves, and that animals shouldn't be in this role. They should be able to live their best animal lives without having this thrust upon them. The quality I would like to bring in at this time is wisdom. And also I like to say, my 18-month-old grandson is here and he's napping right now, but if I suddenly disappear, that's why. And I will pass on to Gail.
Well, Sego Sewa Fuego. Hello, everyone. It is raining here. You might be able to hear that pitter patter on the tin roof. It's raining quite heavily. We've had thunders today and lots of lightning, which is to me a most beautiful thing. And I'm from Six Nations, Ontario, Canada, about an hour out of Toronto. I live on the Six Nations reserve. My nation is Mohawk. And this is my first time being with you lovely ladies. So I don't know exactly, what to say and, how to set all of the intentions that you're setting. But I'm thinking of my community. We have a community of about 25,000 people here on the res. Not all of them live here, but we have about 17 on reserve. But we're having a lot of issues with, well, I would call it CAS matters. That's children's aid, or I don't know what they call it in the States, or but it's child welfare. And there's such an imbalance and an injustice happening here with many families, including one of my own children, and it's horrendous, what they're doing to my grandchildren, and for no reason. But I mean, the other issue too is the death by suicide and overdose, and death by motor vehicle accidents, drinking and driving. I mean, it's like unreal. It's just like, I think you'd like to think you're immune because every week you're hearing, such tragedy every week, every every week, and it's kind of rough. So I want to put, I guess, the community into the circle, and so my intention is to share words and to share teachings and to teach and to share, I guess, what it is that you're asking for in regards to the great law of peace and what it represents. I'll pass it to Angelique.
Thank you, Gail. Hello, everyone from the Netherlands again, the other part of the world. Sitting here today, and it's over 11 p.m. and rainy, very, very cold yesterday, very, very stormy, lots of wind. And today it was rather sunny again. So yeah, good to be here. My quality for tonight is, or tonight, is beauty and light. And also praying for all the children of the world in the 4 directions, brothers and sisters of all 4 directions, and the children of the world, especially the ones who needed support and help and love, deep love. So I bring in my family, my family of origin, especially my daughter and my youngest son, and I pray for my oldest son and his family. That's it. And I go to Evie. Thank you.
Thank you, Angelique. I'm Evie Boykin. Today I'm in Springfield, Massachusetts. And I'd like to bring in 10 people. I'd like to bring in ancestors on both my father's and mother's side. I'd like to add more emphasis to all who control and dominate, bring them in as well to bring that to extinction. And in my words today, what I want to bring in are kindness and forgiveness. And I pass to Marielle.
Okay, so I'm Marielle, close to Montreal, Canada. I have 7 cousins and their children in Toronto, close to you, Gail. So I'll put in everybody who has a spiritual life, so they get inspired to pray for the different world situations. As a quality, I'll put selfless action or uninterested action. That's all.
Thank you. It's good to be in a circle where we begin with blessings for that which is painful, acknowledging that which is painful, with a commitment that we're not normalizing the pains and the violence and the corruption. We're not normalizing it or excusing it away. That we each in our own way are committed to take action, whatever that is, to bring an end to that which has destroyed us, the mountains that are crushing us. So the values that we are holding within this circle and asking it to be multiplied a millionfold, kindness, gratitude, beauty, light, innovation, wisdom, forgiveness, safety for all families and children. A removal of cause of addictions, suicides, death of all kinds, and selfless actions for the good and benefit of all life forms on the planet. With that, I was also saying to Deborah Levine when we were on a little early that I just finished editing the 7 days event that we held. And I'm again, we did 7 days of powerful work. It was work. We really worked. And I guess I had almost forgotten how powerful it was. And just listening again to each of those days reminded me that there's not only great hope, there's great commitment to change. And so I want to just acknowledge the women who attended any or all of those days. So thank you for being here. And we place those that have been named and those who need to be in that circle of divine good, where what seems impossible is dissolved and health and wellness secured, so that there can be new possibilities that weren't there before. And so it is. So none of us are living in a magic key world. And right now we're seeing that the world isn't a magic key world, that we aren't finished with saying no. We are not finished with being discerning and standing up and voicing. And it's needed more than ever before. But over the years, I guess since 2009, when I first heard of the concept of good mind from a woman from the Sixth Nation, I've used it in my classes, and it feels to me like it's again time for us to revisit that. And I could have certainly told the story as I remembered it, but I met Gail. Makes me teary, Gail. I met Gail at the 2003 gathering of Indigenous elders over Memorial Day in Nauvoo, Illinois. One of my special gifts from that event. And as soon as she said where she was from, and I had mentioned good mind, and we went, yeah, good connection. So I asked her if she would come and share the story as they hold that in their tradition of the peacemaker, however she wants to say it, talk to us about it, share it with us. We're here to hear that story, Gail, and know what we might do to not only move it on, keep it alive, participate in whatever way we can for your benefit too. So with that, I'm turning over to Gail Whitlaw, and it's time is the circle's now yours, Gail.
Well, how much time do I have? Because I mean, this is a topic that can go on forever, so I want to keep it within, reason. So how long would you like me to talk?
We set the time from 2 to 3:30 Pacific time. Often it goes till maybe from 2 to 3 to 3:15, but that we have set aside the time. It could be for an hour and a half until 3:30 Pacific time. And if somebody has to, they just make a little in the chat. I have to leave early. So now it's yours.
Well, let's see, where do I begin? I mean, there's so many places to begin when we're talking about the great law of peace. But I guess I'll start with what was happening before the great law of peace. So there was a lot of cannibalism. There was a lot of people who had to leave their villages because it wasn't safe, and so they would move away from the village, and so there was warring, and there was, so I guess some people have this image of it being free and beautiful and everything, wonderful before our guests joined us from around the world. But everything is in its own time. And the same thing that was going on in Europe and all those different areas was kind of happening here. And and it's part of, the prophecy that we had to, every time that there's that imbalance, then we have to find balance. So we called upon I guess, a prophet. I was called because, the prayers were so strong that there needed to be change. So we have, the power of prayer and ceremony that helped manifest this, I guess, this new beginning. So when our prophet came, he also had some helpers. And before I get too much into that story there, I'm going to start with one of the helpers. And so one of the helpers, his name was Hiawatha. So Hiawatha was a man of pure integrity, and he was working along with a peacemaker because it took quite a bit of intense willingness to create that change. So one of the things that Hiawatha had to do was help to clear away the darkness. So some of that darkness, of course, was, we term it bad medicine. Some of it was, an imbalance in mentality. Like there was so much. So with that, I guess that power that he was creating, the first thing he had to do was clean away that darkness. And one of the stories talks about there being an island. And so it was the only place in the area that had all of these fruit trees. And the people were kind of starving, and there was no way to get to that island, because every time that they tried to go across by boat, a big serpent would capsize the boat and eat up the people. So they had to fight with these kind of things. So the first thing that Hiawatha had to do was he had to slay the serpent. And so that took place. Now, a parallel story to that would be Niagara Falls. So if anybody's had the opportunity to visit Niagara Falls, you can tell, when you see it on the topical map, it looks exactly like, a serpent. And so our story talks about that being the place where a serpent was slayed, and they were so big at the time. Like, I mean, that's basically what happened there. And the serpent was laid to rest. And there's a whole story there, but I don't really have time for that whole story. So the same was going on with this lake. So he had to clean up the lake. So he had to go and he had to take on that challenge of ridding the serpents from that water, which he did. He succeeded in that. And so when they finally made it to the island, then they had to clean up the island of all the serpents as well. And so that was done. And then the people were able again to access the fruit trees, and again it's all about imbalance. And some people say that it represents the minds of the people, and how you have this one powerful mind, and it can make or break you. So everybody has presidents and politicians and knows of how one person has the ability to build walls and do all the things that presidents can do, and to put pipelines underneath those beautiful bodies of water that would be totally corrupted and contaminated should there be an accident. But there's not that forethought, and so it's kind of like the same kind of analogy, I guess. And so we have to like look deeply at that. And so what happened to Hiawatha then was he had daughters, and the stories are different as to how many daughters he had. But there was this evil sorcerer. You might see him depicted with snakes in his hair. So he'd have snakes in his hair. His body was just disfigured. And if you look at the Mayan calendar, if you know anything about the Mayan calendar, the deer. So that would be, let me see, one of the signs for that comes just before my birth sign actually was the deer. And if you look at what that sign represents, it represents that disfigurement. It represents that your body is all deformed and disfigurement, but it represents great power, because once you go through all of those trials and tribulations and you rectify those trials and tribulations, then great things can happen. So the same with Tadadaho. It took many challenges to make things right, and so I'll go back to the story now, and then I'll get back to how that concludes. So he picked the nation, the strongest leaders of the nation. So he started with the Mohawk people. So we were on the East Coast, all the way from Massachusetts and Maine all the way through. So there's like, if you look at today's map or a map of 200 years ago, you can tell that our nations, they were side by side kind of, but we all had shared hunting territories and different things. And the Mohawks, they had the strong leaders, and peace started with the Mohawk Nation first. And the Mohawk Nation is also stands for the ability to protect and to foresee and to warn of danger coming from that east. So there was stories about the ships coming, and it was foretold that there was going to be ships coming, and that some ships were the ships that were going to bring wonderful things to the land, and then there was the ships that weren't. And so when the ships came, it was hard to determine what were the good ships and what weren't. And so obviously, I used to think that Plymouth Rock, Massachusetts, I thought in the history books, that's where they say Columbus landed. And it wasn't until reality hit that Columbus didn't even come to our shores. Columbus went down to the islands and wreaked havoc, down there first. But history, you don't believe any of those history books that you read, because chances are there's maybe a 1% truth, but 99% untruth. But the effects of what happened are interesting, because when everyone started to cross the waters, and we were discovered, we had a thriving, I guess a very thriving world, or trade routes, very thriving trade routes, and I would say even around the world, because we lived on the ocean, so we knew how to canoe, and we knew how to build boats, and we knew how to travel on the water. And in fact, I was in New Zealand, and they talked about, I met the Waitaha people, and then I have some books that were written by, oh gosh, what is her name? Anyway, she gave me 2 volumes of books written by the Waitaha people, because when I was there, I happened to be at Kauai Pura, and as I was walking through Kauai Pura, there was this little sign, and it said Tree of Peace. And I looked up, and there's this white pine, and I said, okay, tell me about that. What is your story behind that? And so they talked about the 1,000 years of peace, and how the 1,000 years of peace was then followed by warlike tribes who came and inhabited the islands. But the people, the Waitaha people, came from Turtle Island. So kind of like they were our ancestors from this land that inhabited the land at that time. So I found it so fascinating, because we talk about in our stories the 1,000 years of peace as well. And so every country that I visited and I have been to, it always has some tie into the great law of peace. And so I don't know, I just loved it in New Zealand. What a magical, wow, what a magical place. And there's those Lemurian temples everywhere, and hot springs and everything you need you have right there in that beautiful land. So when we're tying that story into, you know, the great law of peace, it fits perfectly, because there was a time of great peace, and then there was a time of disruption, and it was like that through all the dark ages and all of those other nations as well. So the Mohawk people then, it took some time, and he was certainly tested. They said, if you are who you say you are, well then, you know, we're going to give you a challenge. And if you survive the challenge, then we might listen to you. And so one of the stories is about him being tested. So they put him at the top of a tree overhanging a waterfall. And then they cut the tree down, and he fell over the waterfall. And they said nobody could survive that. Okay, enough of him. And the next morning, there he is. He had his fire going, and they said, "Well, you must be who you say you're going to be. So we'll listen." But there was many tests like that. That was one test, but there was many tests that he had to go through to prove that he um, came with that good heart and that good mind. Because our stories also talk about our creation, how we came from the stars, and that we're star people, and we all know we're star people. I mean, we don't even have to we don't even have to second guess that. And when I guess the female figure of the story, you know, comes through that portal or that hole and falls on the back of the turtle, and then the occupants, like otter, there's little otters, and there's different animals who dove deep down trying to get her some land or some earth, so that she could create and plant those seeds, so that she could survive, because she couldn't survive without, you know, food and different into into the mythology of of what is real and what isn't real. Because one of the things that is going on today is we live in a world where the opposite is true. And so we're being programmed in a certain way, but the opposite of the way we're being programmed is actually the truth. And they said there's more, I guess, credibility, or there's more emphasis on our stories. And so it'd be like Greek mythology. It would be like any type of entities, like in the creation story, how the earth is created, then what we're living today. So we have to go back, and we have to understand that deep connection to our star families. And so we talk of the Milky Way, of being that place where people cross to the other side. And when we're looking at the great law of peace, then there was a lot of work that manifested because of the guides, the ancestors, our star relatives, that brought the, I guess, the desire to, you know, go back and to create, you know, this great change. So once the Mohawk Nation was kind of like listening to the peacemaker and his teachings, then they moved into the other nations. So then they started to work more together, moving across the nations. The one nation, though, that was the toughest was that Onondaga Nation, and that's where Tadadaho was using his energy as a sorcerer. And so in order to approach him, they needed a lot of power behind the movement, so to speak. I'll call it a movement because, you know, it was the movement towards peace. So as they moved across, and finally they had enough, I guess, momentum to approach Tadadaho, or the guy with the snakes in his hair, They knew some of the challenges that they were going to face, but they all started to sing and they all started to, move forward, and they were able to anticipate what he was going to throw at them. They got to the point where they were able to use, I would call it, the light in order to take the snakes out of his hair. So it was like they started then to change his mind. They started to take those snakes and they started to comb them out of his hair. And he transformed from the most evil sorcerer to our most powerful chief. And because he was our most powerful chief, he wasn't given just ordinary powers like the other nations, the chiefs of other nations. He was given extra special duties. And again, it was the forethought of the peacemaker, because he said a man of his power needs to have that I guess movement to move forward. And he can't be just a regular chief. He has to um, have more qualities, and so they made him the chief of the chiefs. I'm using chiefs, but that is not really what we called ourselves, but it's what you might understand and what you might know. But we certainly didn't use chiefs in our teachings and our stories, but I'm just using it because that's a term that everyone might relate to now. When we look at what it is that the great law brought, it brought peace, power, and righteousness, and it brought the good mind. So the good mind consists of healthy mind, body, spiritual, mental, emotional, and physical balance. And if anything is out of balance, any one of those areas is out of balance, it affects everything. And so what we have to do is we have to find a way to bring back that balance again. So look at us today. We have a lot of mental instability, mental imbalance. And again, that is because of history, and that is because of what's happened, with things like, well, I guess it would be the Holocaust. We had that Holocaust right here, and we're still facing that today on our lands. We had all kinds of mind techniques, and we were social experiments. Everything that happened over in Europe was brought here, and they learned a lot from doing it in Europe, and they brought it over here, and they used all of those techniques here to try to destroy us as people. But when we look at that, we have to look always at balance. Why did we have to go through that process? So I'll share a story about the Laika people in South America. So the Laika people were very strong spiritual beings that possessed the ability to have that foresight. And so when the conquistadors came, instead of looking at it as a negative thing, they just said they are out of balance. And so they moved way up into the mountains. I mean, way up past the, what is it? The line of trees, the tree line. And they were told that there would be signs when it was time for them to come back. And those signs happened sometime in the 60s. So it brought forth the time for them to secretly come from the mountains and to live among the people and to help bring back some of that beauty that we held. And it was the same with there was many people who took their families way up into the mountains, and when the time was right, they knew that they were to come and that they were to share all of those old ways and those old teachings. So our old ways never died and our old teachings never died, but they had to be covered. So another thing that happened while I was in New Zealand was we were at her name was Rose Perry, and she passed away. But she had this elders gathering at her place, or healers gathering, and there was some channelers there. And so I just happened to be sitting at the right place in the right time, and somebody went into this channeling mode. And when they went into this channeling mode, they started talking about my ancestors. They said it must have been like somebody in my lineage. I don't know how far back, but she says, the great law isn't the great law anymore. People aren't living the great law. She said, but the tree had to fall. So I'll talk about the tree and what that represents. She said, but the tree had to fall. She says, because the tree had to protect something. And I'm thinking about, wow, so we had to lose all of this to protect something. So that would be our ways, or something like that. She says, but the tree is rising again. So the tree will stand again. And when it stands, what our teachings are, it's going to stand again, and we're going to go back to respecting the environment and living that good life and growing our own food and being those strong-minded people, getting rid of all these things that have created imbalance in us. And so when I heard that story, I also thought of I guess a session I had with one of our, what do you call him, historians. And so we were in class one day, and we were talking about this powdery substance that they were saying, oh, this cures diabetes. You just take this every day, and your diabetes will go away. And I'm looking, what? And so we kind of talked about that. And he says, he says, what it will take, he said, is the corporations to fall. Once the corporations to fall, and they're all based on money. So once you take that money and you bankrupt these corporations, that's when change will come. So look at our natural disasters now. Look at everything that's happening around the world. It's for a reason. It is definitely for a reason. And it is to clear all of that debris and all of that energy from that old way of thinking, so that we can move forward into our time as in a good way, so we can move forward, and we can plant our gardens, and we can get back to living the way we can bring that light back. So this other story that I'll share is from another teaching, and this comes from Japan. So there were some healers that came into our community, and these healers were taught, or were using this, I guess, this therapy called Jore. And what they would do is they would come, and so they would sit two chairs together or across from each other, and they would direct energy. And sometimes they would come and they would kind of press some pressure points and different things. And they would come all the way from Massachusetts once a month to work with our people. So what we did was they said, well, we have to train. Because we won't be able to keep coming. We're going to have to train. So there was 7 of us that got trained. And in order to receive this training, we had to understand where the concept came from and how it worked. So they talked about, there was a lot that they talked about. One of the things that resonated the most with me was, they said, around the 60s, sometime in the 60s, he said, the darkness transitioned into light, meaning the darkness was didn't have as much power anymore, and it was starting to transition into the light. So we had to forgive our ancestors, and we had to forgive all that happened over that time, because they were under the influence of the dark. They were under the influence of the moon. They were under the influence of water. And so the water worked well with all of these new pharmaceuticals that they were developing at that time. But then when that transition happened, that is going by the wayside. And so those pharmaceuticals do not have the power anymore. And the only thing that is going to, work will be the power of our hands. And so if you notice their sun, or their flag, there's a big sun. So they're using the energy of the sun to do that healing. So Reiki and all of these different therapies that bring in, you know, all of this energy that work with the light. That's the way of the future. And so that's where this Jore came from. And I was so inspired by by that, because it made so much sense. It just made so much sense to me that it would work. So when I thought of that story too, I thought back to our teachings, and I thought about, you know, the other stories about the, you know, the 100,000 years of peace in, you know, those other countries. And in Mexico, it's the same thing. When I had gone to Mexico, kind of giving you this because I'm going to go and I'm going to talk about something else. So we were in Mexico and we were crossing over to Guatemala. And as we got ready to cross over into Guatemala, we went to this place called, I believe it was Pomona. And it was a place where the Toltecs walked through the fire and transformed into Mayans. And I can't remember the story behind why they wanted to do that. And in my mind, it's going, why would you want to do that? But I mean, anyways, that's what they wanted, and that's what they did. But there was this central temple, and the central temple was where all the big things happened. So it was like where the weddings and the kings and the queens, all kinds of things happened at the central temple. And around was other pyramids and other areas, and they all had their own separate religions. They had, you know, or their own ways and their own, just like us as Haudenosaunee people. So when I was looking at all that, I go, this is probably where the concept of this transition, this transformation that the peacemaker brought, this is probably where this was rooted in, because I know that we all have our stories of this being who passed all the way up through the Americas. Then he went across the ocean and he wasn't accepted. And when he wasn't accepted across the ocean, there was still something that he had forgot to give us. And when he came back, he gave that, and it was actually one of the last ceremonies that we needed for our longhouses. And once he did that, he left. And what that means is we have everything that we need to bring that peace. So when I talked about that tree that fell, we had the opportunity to, I guess, put down our weapons of war. There was this tree of peace that stood for many years, and it was a tall white pine. And when the peacemaker went across the ocean, he said, "You'll know I'm okay if you put a little cut in the tree and it doesn't bleed, then I am fine." And so people would do that. They would like put a little nick in the tree to see if it was going to bleed. And one day it did, you know, one day. But I mean, this was like you know, a long way into it. And it was about the time that the peacemaker was hung or put on the cross on the other side of the ocean. That was before he came back, and he in spirit form gave us that last message. And so that tree of peace, what was underneath it was our weapons of war. So it was like there was this water flowing under the tree, and under the tree we made peace with when you know, the work was done by those prophets, and we agreed that there wouldn't be war like there was. They were certainly, you know, be defending the people and defending, but they weren't going to create war. And so that's what that great law, that great tree of peace represents. So it's a pine tree, a white pine. On top you sits an eagle, and that eagle then is an alert. So it flies high and it can see, and then the eagle flies and it sees in a different way than we see. And so it has this canning ability to be our guide, or to be our helper. And because it can see so differently, it has a different way of the sight. The sight is different. And so because he can fly so high, he's able to connect to that spiritual realm. And so that's why the eagle is so important to our nations, because he has that physical ability to sit on that tree and to be our guardian, or our trumpet, or our warning, or however you want to put that. And so we have the tree, then we have underneath the weapons that we've buried, and we promise not to be that warring people anymore unless we have to. But generally we shouldn't have to, but I mean, that's the agreement that we made. Now, when that tree started to bleed, and there had been, just like similar to the story of the disciples, there had been young men that he had been training all of this time. So Peacemaker was born not too far away from here. He was born in, we call it Tyendinaga, which is one of our Mohawk communities, and it's about 3 hours away from Six Nations, like where I live. And there they talk about the fact that he was born to a virgin mother, and the virgin mother was impregnated, and the grandmother tried to get rid of the child because she didn't know where the child came from. And she tried really hard to get rid of the baby, but each time the baby survived these things, survived fire, survived drowning, and then finally a messenger had to come and tell them that he is a special child. You have to care for him in a special way. And so he also grew differently than us. And he actually wasn't from the Mohawk Nation. He was actually from the Huron Nation, which is, of course, a nation that, like at that time, we had a lot of different nations. And even the thought, though, of a nation, we really shouldn't segregate ourselves and be this nation and that nation and this nation and that nation, because basically we're all one people. Worldwide, we're all one people, and we really shouldn't segregate ourselves in that way. However, when he was growing up, he grew faster than most, and he was short. He was short, and he had, I think it was something in his speech. There was something that was wrong with his speech, or not wrong, but it was just his speech. He had a speech impediment, and so there were times when he would take certain boys from the community, and they would go and he would be teaching them really powerful teachings, from above. And it was these leaders that came back, and they helped to bridge the nations together. And there were times when the mothers wanted to follow and see where their sons were going, and they tried to sneak up, and they tried to see what was going on, and they would see him standing by the tree and teaching all of these young men. And so they were kind of like likened to disciples, and I believe there was 12 of them, just like across the ocean. And it's really interesting, when I think about all the parallels and all the correlations between many stories, again, that I hear from different nations around the world. It empowers me to know that there's always hope. There's always a chance that this magic is going to come from somewhere, and things are going to shift. So once the nations were kind of gathered, and the idea was to create that healthy mind, body, spirit, and soul, we lived in harmony again for a short while, but it's always short-lived. I mean, you can't be always on the good too long, because then you're going to get lazy, right? And you kind of need that dark side to keep you keep you on your toes. And so when we're kept on our toes like that, we are able to uh be right. So I'm sharing that too because I had this really powerful thing happen to me. I was always wondering why I was attracted to the oceans. Love oceans. And I would just go sit and I would just like feel the energy and I'd hear the wind, and I would always ask, why do you bring me here? What is it you want to tell me? What am I supposed to know? And I never heard, I never heard, I never heard. And it was just like, well, but one day the ocean spoke, and I was standing in the ocean. I had my feet, I was in about not much water, but just enough to feel the waves coming in and out. And again, this was in New Zealand. And 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 all of a sudden the ocean started to speak, and it talked about so many things that there were tears were flowing, like at least for a good hour. Those tears were just flowing, and the ocean shared so much with me. It talked about those beings that were pushed off into the ocean by those pirates. What do you call them? They were anyways, you know what I'm talking about, how all of those sacrifices were because the ocean spirits called them, and they knew before they came into this time that they were going to be called to the ocean. And the ocean is kind of like a portal. And so as you pass, you go through the ocean, and there's a place that you go. And so those spirits of the ocean wanted this these souls, because every now and then, just like anything, you need sacrifices. And just like here on earth, there was a lot of times when there were sacrifices that were performed in to appease the spirits. Our own stories about the fact that there was a spirit of the corn, and if the corn wasn't growing, then they would uh, sacrifice enemies. So if they had like 3 warriors or something like that, then if the spirit of the corn was calling for a sacrifice, then they would sacrifice those for that spirit of the corn. And because we're very highly spiritual in origin, like all of us are, we had to pay attention, we had to listen. And once those sacrifices were made, then the spirit of the corn came back and was able to feed the people again. And there's many legends like that. There's many. If you ever have the opportunity, there's this real old movie, I think it was made in the 80s, and it's called Dreamkeeper. And it's not Dreamcatcher, it's not the Stephen King version. It's a movie called Dreamkeeper. It's about 3 hours long, but it goes through a lot of our stories from different nations, and it talks about, it kind of like enacts them. And I don't know, I've seen it 1,000 times, but I'll watch it 1,000 more, because it's just a really interesting and powerful movie that kind of keeps your interest, but it also shows you all the different stories. So I forget who created that movie, but it's available on YouTube. I don't know if you can get it anywhere else these days, but you can certainly get it on YouTube. So we have a lot of stories. One of the stories that we're also told is about there have been many times that the earth has been destroyed. So earth was destroyed by fire. That could have been dinosaurs, or that could have been, asteroid. That could have been something that hit the earth, and there was fire. So people had to go underground. And they're talking about that time coming again. Um, we are also know the story of the floodwaters, and how, during that time of the floods, how again people had to live underground, and to be underground. And then so we've evolved, and we've come up through the earth many times. So I was in where was I I was in Mexico City, and in Mexico City there's this temple, and it's called Temple Mayor. It's right downtown, right by the heart of some of those great big Catholic churches and basilicas, but it's right there. And I went to the basilica, or went to that sacred site. And so we were going through, and it was a Sunday, and in Mexico, if you're from the country, then you can go through those sacred sites free. And so as I was going through, I was told to stop. So I stopped and put my hand on the wall, and I had this I guess I would call it a very interesting vision. And what I saw was, first of all, it looked like the Caribbean or something. There was just this beautiful body of water that was like turquoisey, bluey, like just this most beautiful color water. And and when I looked, there was a spaceship, and the spaceship was hovering up there. And when that spaceship was hovering, it for me it was like I don't know what to think, but there was two people up in the top part of that spaceship, and they were looking down and they were saying, "Is this the planet that we're supposed to populate? Does this have what we need to populate?" Because the stories are that we're kind of fed something. It's kind of like we're a tank, and we're fed water, and we're fed air, and we're fed all of these things, to survive on this planet. And so when I saw that, of course, visions, they don't give you a lot of details, but when I told the I guess the local from that area, he said, "Well, do you know where you are?" And I said, "Well, I'm here at the temple." He goes, "No, no." He said, "This used to be a body of water." And he says, "Underneath this body of water, all the temples were built, and then the temples were built over temples and built over temples and built over temples. Because if you're downtown there, you can see that some of the buildings are slanted like that, and you wonder how come people are living there, because of one little tremor, and bam, those houses could fall. But the whole city is built on these major temples that were water at one time." And so I thought about that vision, and I said, it is true, who knows where they were from, but they talk about the fact that, there's our star ancestors are coming and who are raping the earth right now of minerals and different things. And once they're done their pillaging, then they'll leave because they got all of the everything that they need from the earth. And so I'm putting all of these stories together, and I see that vision, and I'm going, there must be some truth to some of these things that I hear, especially if it's being presented, to me in that aspect. So again, it ties into our creation stories about, how the earth was made, how it was water, a body of water, before there was any life. And that's our Turtle Island. There was a body of water, and in came, the being, and found that animal, that turtle, and life was created and expanded and out. And so things make sense and things don't make sense, but they make sense to me the more pieces that you get and the more pieces that you put together. And when we start to look at what our roles and our responsibilities are and our duties are to the 7 generations that are coming. And we have to look forward, and we have to make sure that our intentions are clear so that our 7 generations are going to exist and they're going to live in a better world. And so we have to make sure that we find a way to deal with pollution, to find a way that we deal with everything that's happening on the earth right now. And we have to find a medium for bringing back what is sacred to the land. So what's sacred to the land is many things. It's us humbling ourselves on our beautiful mother, and giving thanks. And so our people have what we call the Thanksgiving address, and it's how we start all of our meetings and it's how we end our meetings, because if we're talking about something spiritual and powerful, or if we have to make sure that our ancestors are invited in, and so that they can help us and they can guide us to make those decisions. So we have the Thanksgiving address, and if you come to our country, that's, Indian country for us, but in Shoshone country, you're going to see and hear that. And so it starts with, all of the little, from all of the bugs to all of the plants to all of the medicine plants to all of the bushes and shrubs and trees and the flyers and swimmers, and to us as human beings. And it goes all the way to the the thunders and all of our natural forces, as well as the moon and the sun and creator, and all of those, everything is included in that Thanksgiving address, so that in our hearts and in our minds we bring that together and we're able to think clear. And once we have that in our minds, our intentions are honorable, and our intentions are good. So so saying all that, the great law is about a way of life, and it's not about conquer and divide. It's about being respectful and thinking of others, and it's kind of those old values that we had, but through technology we've kind of forgotten, and through all of these changes and all of the chaos and disruptions that has happened, then we have to understand that um, we can have that. We just have to put that forth in our minds. And once we have that in our minds, then we're able to move forward, I guess, in a direction that is more favorable to the balance that the earth needs and that the earth requires at this time. So I mean, there's so many aspects to this. So the way we know how to grieve is through the experience of Hiawatha. So remember, I talked about Hiawatha and how he had the job of, getting rid of the darkness before the light could come in. Well, he went through his own dark time also, when the sorcerer killed his daughters. And so he was so deep into grief that he left and went on his own by himself for a period of years. And we don't know how long that period of years was. But during that time, he learned the tools and the techniques for dealing with grief and loss. And so we call that a condolence. And so he has put in place, or we have it in our stories and our teachings, that we can utilize those teachings in order to help us. And so there was a very powerful ceremony that we had out in Minnesota. We and some of the chiefs and clan mothers and a lot of the people, we went to the headwaters of the Mississippi. When we went to the headwaters of the Mississippi, there was the four directions. So we had the people from the north, east, west, and South America. And so what we did was we put up the condolence cane. We went through all of the teachings. The men went through all of those teachings, and we had it was done so beautifully and so spiritual that all you had to do is be there, and you saw how the elements played into the experiences that we had. Like even driving out there, we had torrential rain, and some of the roads had been closed, and roads were damaged, but we managed to get out there. And even while we were there, we had some rain and during this time. But it was really important, because it happened at different parts of the teachings, and as soon as we got past that, then the sun would come out, as if to say, this is the light. So this is the darkness, this is that troubled time, and this is the light. And I remember the Aztec dancers, they did a very special healing song for all of us, because we had to heal all nations in order to begin the process of that peace. And this gathering was the vision of one of the chiefs who had passed on. and he never got to see it fulfilled until after his death. And so then it was part of his family that had put on this gathering and invited the people from all directions, and it was a very powerful experience for all of us. So again, there's lots and lots of stories about it, but the Great Law is something that we're reviving again. The power of our people was, we had everything. We had a political system, a social system, a spiritual system. We had everything in place before um, the influx of people, and so that kind of muddled things up a little bit. But now we're back to that point again, where we can say, okay, now that we have everybody here, let's continue on with this peace. Let's bring peace to the world. And even though it's hard for you to imagine peace with what we're experiencing today, all the turmoil everywhere, we still actively can restore that great peace to our peoples again. So I kind of want to stop so that you can ask questions or add a little input if you so desire. And
As I listen to you, Gail, it reminds me that we're at that place again, removing the serpents, combing the hair, bringing those that have been diverted into using their skills and gifts inappropriately back to the light. It feels like we're right, just like you said, that this is where you're at, and that's how you're feeling it in your nation. I know that's how I'm feeling in the communities I'm involved with too. So I think that there's a commonality here, and so I really appreciate your stories and your experience. Thank you. And if any of you, if Arlie, the other two had to leave because they had appointments, but they put that in the chat so we would know that and sent their thankfulness for being here. So Arlie or Angelique, is there anything you want to add or questions you might have?
Comment question about the Thanksgiving address. I understand that the Thanksgiving address can be something fairly short, like you would give at the beginning of a meeting that was going to be an hour and a half long, or it can be 3 days long in and of itself. Is that so?
Oops, you're muted.
that is very true. And those short versions, again, well, we have to adjust to everything. But if we're doing a very important gathering like that gathering I was telling you about, that was not just a short Thanksgiving address. That took, and we're only allowed to do that part a certain time of the day. We can't, anything that we're doing on a spiritual level like that has to be done by 4 o'clock or when the sun is going down. So we have to end everything by that time, and we're not to take business beyond that point. So during that time, there's a time that those things can be spoken about, and once it gets past that time, then it has to come to an end. But so yeah, it is possible for that to take all of that time, because in these days they have to say it, but then they also have to translate it in the afternoon, and different things like that, so everybody can know what is being said, because unfortunately the language has been taken away from most. And not only that, the people have been taken away from their culture. And so a lot of people really need to understand what that Thanksgiving address is about. So they have to have that teaching experience in there too. So it's really important for, I guess, the long version to be used when it can, but the shorter version for an hour meeting is certainly appropriate too, because it just kind of gives you a picture of what it is you have to bring in. So a lot of times I'll use that and I'll do it as a meditation. And so we'll talk about the plants and the animals, and we'll have you imagine all of these things. And then if there's anything that's left out, then in your heart and your mind, you put it there and you give thanks for it. So, I mean, yeah, it's a beautiful thing, the Thanksgiving address. And again, sometimes the Thanksgiving address isn't even the right way to characterize those words, because it's what you are thankful for, what you need to be thankful for on a daily base. And so Thanksgiving sometimes doesn't quite adequately kind of like name what it really is about. So still a powerful thing.
So Gal, just you don't have to be quickly, but in the Six Nations and Mohawk, what is the role of women in leadership? That's a whole thing all by itself, right? But
Yeah,
succinct.
yeah, it is. So if you saw at the event that we had in Illinois, we had some men who were a little bit trying to like not let us women have our power. Being Mohawk, I made sure that that didn't happen. And I made sure that we were able to stay on track, and we were able to focus on not the power, that overburdening of teachings, but to establish that, in our society, the women have the duty and responsibility for the the people, and they also have the duty and responsibility for families. And the men have the duty and responsibility for taking care of that. So it'd be like, but I'll give you an example of the longhouse. So in the longhouse, there's a whole bunch of rules that have to be performed in order for the ceremonies to take place. We're the only people that still follow our cycle of ceremonies. We still, through our longhouses, put through those ceremonies, and most other nations will put a ceremony here and a ceremony there, but not like we do. So we have to have an established way of communicating. We have to have an established way of understanding roles. So um, the women are responsible for a lot of things. They're even responsible for elevating chiefs and putting the power, because it's the women who get to watch and can make those decisions about who would be the best to fulfill those roles that need to be. And sometimes it's not always doesn't go according to plan sometimes, but it's the women who also and this is hypothetical because we're having an issue with this right now. We're kind of having like a different view from, and again, it's the fault of the people, because the people have not put in all of our chiefs that are needing to be in place. So there's kind of like this thing that has happened over time, and the men have gotten a little bit too cocky, and trying to take over and be the voice when it's not really supposed to be that way. But the women have a very important role, and the women, how it works and what makes us successful is the respect that's supposed to go. So for instance, in the longhouse, there's certain people who are appointed as faith keepers. So a faith keeper is not responsible for 10 duties. If you're responsible for the fire, it's your responsibility to make sure that there's wood, that it's chopped, that when it's time, then you look after the stoves for the burning of the tobacco. That's your only duty and responsibility. You don't have to do like a lot of the other chores. Um, the women, they confer, and they know what what foods have to be made and prepared and where they come from. So hey guys, we need some deer for this feast, and so it's up to the hunters to provide what is needed for the different feasts. But what makes it work is everybody has a role and a responsibility, and it's only one. It's not 10 roles and one person running the show. And so that makes it a lot easier. So remember, there's a lot of longhouses. So here at Six Nations, we have 5 longhouses. So each of them have faith keepers, each of them have duties and responsibilities, and each of them are responsible for the overall running of the ceremonies. So I mean, there's just politically, the women kind of give the advice to the men to what to say. They tell them the decisions that the families have made in order to present at those meetings. And if there's any turmoil, so what happens is, say there's a council. Council means kind of like a political event. So there's this piece of wampum, there's this string of wampum that's put down. And as long as things are going smoothly and nobody is getting rough and rowdy, then that wampum will stay there. Should things get out of control, they simply go take that wampum, the whole meeting is done. Plain and simply, then nobody has to argue about that. Meeting is done, because it has to be more about respect. And so people respect that wampum. And I mean, there's a lot of things that have kind of shifted a little bit, but trying to get all of that back is the important part of what we do. Yeah.
I think that's what we're up
Yeah.
to
Yes.
worldwide.
Yeah.
Worldwide.
Yes.
Wow. Oh, thank you so much for just the opportunity to sit and listen to you. It's great, and to be with these wonderful women too. So
Yeah.
let's just in our closure gather up that energy that we set of all those qualities, which is all about bringing healing, removal of energy agendas such as corporations, that which has entrapped us, ending those energies, restoring the balance as was originally intended and lived, and doing that in great respect and collaboration. Let's just magnify that energy and broadcast it out into the world. Past, I've had trees, water, earth, air, so many broadcasting that out as partners in that new vision. So we thank you for being here, Gail. Thank all of you for holding space. Expand, transform. Many blessings. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you for the invitation to come tonight.
That's great.
Yes.
Thank you,
Yeah.
Gail. And thank you, Sharon, as always.
Sleep well, everyone. Bye.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Yes. Thank you. Yeah.